Welcome back to the plenary closing of the Breaking Barriers Conference. We're going to reflect on the UDW program, and I'm not going to do that alone. One of my guests is Maarten Gischler. He's here in the studio, Senior Water Advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. And welcome, Maarten. Yes. And my other guest is online. She would have loved to be here in the studio, but because she is at home waiting the results of a COVID-19 test, we will have to do with her being with us online. Still, we're very happy to have her here, member of the Board of Directors of NWO, Anita, Hardon. Welcome. Welcome to you both. I would like to say that we have two guests, but I think it's very important to mention again that we would love to hear your thoughts. Your voice is also very important. You can join us in this conversation by using the network app. Just go to the live voting window. That's in the network app on the left side of your screen. Left side of your screen in the network app, the live voting window. That is where you can type down your questions and thoughts, share them with us as we continue this conversation and reflect on the UDW program. Question number one, what did you appreciate in the UDW program? Let me ask you, Maarten, first, to reflect on that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, of course, first of all, I liked by design the focus on urban deltas, because we see them as sort of pressure cookers on the front lines of global change, demographic change, climate change, economic development, etc. What I also very much appreciate is I was involved in the program between 2012 and 2015, so that was the early stages. And if I see now how the community has built, how this sort of transdisciplinary character has developed of the program, there's a big difference between the conversations now and the conversations in 2012 when we started.
Yeah, because I was interested in that, because I have a feeling that there's this major shift. If you, just in the rhetoric, the words, the underlying themes seem to have changed slightly. How much has the change been between 2012 and today?
Well, I think, you know, based on the debate of the past 3 days, I think that has been a major shift where this, you know, I think the breaking barriers metaphor is really appropriate. Maybe not all the barriers are broken, but at least there are a lot of holes poked into those barriers with you know, better views from one silo onto the next, and that is both silos between academic disciplines, but also the sort of the barriers between researchers and communities, between young researchers and more seasoned practitioners, etc.
So you're actually happy with that as part of what you appreciate of the Urbanizing Deltas of the World program. Anita? Oh, you could go ahead.
No, also, I mean, in terms of results, I think, you know, some findings have been game-changing, and maybe not necessarily because they were revolutionary, but because they were game-changing in context. And that is because policymakers often make policy based on assumptions and stories they believe in, and those assumptions do not always prove to be right. So if then science comes in and challenges those assumptions and makes space for a new narrative that could lead to different decisions, I think that's game-changing.
So I think we'll get to that when we deal with what should get more attention in the future, but could you mention one of the game changers?
Well, I think, I mean, the rise and fall in Vietnam. I mean, I think the policy narrative was a lot around, you know, the sea levels are rising, there's not much we can do. But at the same time, the ground is sinking because there's too much groundwater development. And that one you can little do with local action, but the other, groundwater development, yes, you can regulate that locally.
And that's a game changer.
That's a game changer.
Anita Hardon, same question to you. What did you appreciate in the Urbanizing Deltas of the World program?
I think this is such an important program because it allows for collaborations across different sites that are facing similar problems, different problems, but on the same theme. And allowing for learning through this comparison and this contextualizing I also think it's really, really interesting because so much very concrete innovations have been made and tested out. And the way I see the relevance of these kinds of innovations is that through the collaborations, they can travel. Other people see what was developed in site A, and they might be interested in trying it out in site B. And I think that kind of incremental innovation is incredibly important, and that this program facilitates that. So I think it's a really important program. Also for NVO, because in terms of how we collaborate internationally, I'm a great proponent of these kinds of programs where you learn from the North and the South together about how to mitigate problems or solve them if you can.
I think we'll get back to that when we ask the question, what can NVO learn from this? I think there's a lot to say about that. Let's see, if you have something to say, if you want to join us in this discussion, please use the live voting window that's left in the network app on the left side. We'll just continue to the next question. And in the meantime, don't forget to join us in this conversation. What aspects should be treasured in the future, in future programming? Maarten.
Well, I think the point Anita just made is this multi-country character that makes it easier to also sort of connect with more global debates. I think in particular in the domain of climate adaptation, the debate is really global and the challenges are global. So I think that is a very important thing. The other thing is, the connection between the theoretical research and, the day-to-day livelihoods on the ground. Bridging the gap between the peer-reviewed article and, the day-to-day life.
That should be kept.
Yeah, I think that is important. Yeah.
Anita?
I agree with those points, and I am especially interested in that kind of multi-stakeholder engagements that these studies have cherished, and the way they have been kind of successful, which I think is really important. I work in global health, and in my area, at the other half of my work as at the university, in global health, it's often very hard to get kind of experts, scientists to listen to what ordinary people are facing. And it looks like in this domain and in this program, you have been really, really successful. One of the presentations said in, what was it, shaking the tree.
Yeah.
Something has happened, and I think that's amazing. And in a couple of years, to have been able to make that kind of impact in terms of different stakeholders really getting together and understanding the differences, but also working together to get things done.
Yeah.
I'm eager to learn more about how that happened, because I think that's so important for many transitions in the world.
Shaking the tree was also something that touched me on a personal level, because it's a strong metaphor about life and looking at yourself, your family, your surroundings, the environment. But if you shake a tree, obviously things fall out, things are disrupted. What should we leave out in the future, Maarten? Because if you know what you want to keep, there must be something that we want to leave out.
Wow.
Well, I mean, the metaphor of shaking the tree for me was, I really appreciate the opening keynote by Salim Al-Houk.
Yeah.
And, his emphasis on the need to be humble. And I think that's also, particularly on our side.
Yeah.
It's not Dutch knowledge that's going to solve the local problems in Bangladesh, in Vietnam. The ability to listen,
sit down and listen before you teach.
To develop that, and then, try to infuse, where relevant, some new knowledge, because, the water futures and the delta futures will not be the same as the delta past. So there is a need for new knowledge, but, it takes time and it takes a lot of listening to be able to, infuse that into local processes in a good way.
As an advisor, senior advisor, water advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, how do you deal with that? Because when Salim ul Hook says you have to actually sit down and listen before you teach, and everything you learn cannot be quantified or put in sheets or in Excel sheets, how do you actually implement this type of feedback in institutions with policymakers who are stuck, is maybe the wrong word, but still deal with older ways of knowing?
That's a good question, and I think maybe for us, for me as a policymaker at the Foreign Ministry, how do we enable that listening and that taking the time in the way we design programs and all the criteria that we ask? Because the list of criteria that programs have to meet are becoming so long that sort of the accountability towards meeting all those checklists, goes at the expense of the space to listen to what the people on the ground have to say.
Thank you. Anita, same question to you. I mean, especially with your other half of work being in healthcare, global healthcare, this pandemic is truly bringing up questions of what should we leave behind and what should we take along into the future. With regards to the Urbanizing Deltas of the World program, suggestions for leaving things in the past?
Yeah, I guess the pandemic teaches us that we have to really value the way people can care for themselves. It's essential in terms of preventing the infections. And part of my work now is working with the World Health Organization on guidelines for how we can enable good self-care. And maybe the parallel to this area of work could be that what really interests me also in the contrasting studies that have been done, the comparative studies, is yes, we have to learn and listen from what's going on locally and really see how that can be supported towards a kind of better way of managing water in this case, or mitigating effects of climate change. And I'm very interested in what people do. I'm an anthropologist, so that's my bread and butter. But I'm also interested in what kind of values underlie what they're doing so that we better understand those values. But maybe more important for our work here in the institutions, in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in NVO, is how can we facilitate and enable? So what's needed to give people more kind of power to also deal with their own problems? So how can we enable good action, but also how can we enable learning from those local sites? So that's something that I would like to think about a bit more now that this project is ending.
Thank you so much. That brings me to the next question. And in the meantime, if you want to join this discussion, left in the network app is the live voting section. You can just share your thoughts and they'll pop up on the screen here, and we can add them to this debate, not debate, but conversation. What should get more attention in future programs? Maarten, you both spoke about enabling, and I would have to say shout out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all the partners in the Dutch governmental institutions that are actually enabling this. But what should get more attention? Because as an advisor, that's on top of your mind. I'm sorry, I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you.
No, what I think I liked in the opening session also the address by Gabriel Bammer.
Yeah.
And the sort of more systems change thinking.
Yeah.
I was this morning, I listened into the evaluation session, and some of the researchers were saying, well, a PhD takes 4 years. That is way too short to accompany a change process on the ground in whatever delta we've been working with. These are processes of generations. So,
wow.
So I think developing a sort of overarching sort of systems change concept for this kind of program, and saying, our way of working is we work in projects, but you can sort of envision a string of projects that go where you jump from one to the next to the next in this bigger time frame.
Yeah,
how do systems change? And we talk about this all of society approach. what does that actually mean? How do you bring all of society along in a change process? And I think there are good and interesting frameworks that are developing around this big question. And it would be interesting to sort of, fit a program like UDW and maybe subsequent programs that follow
into
in
that
such a bigger frame.
bigger frame. You agree, Anita?
Yes, very much so. I feel very frustrated in NVO when we start up programs on big, wicked problems and then they last 3 to 4 years. I'm always thinking when a program starts, what do we do next? And I think this systems thinking is key to how we should be thinking about financing research consortia and programs in the future. Actually, we shouldn't stop after one round of projects. That should be the basis for programming on and thinking about where do we go from here. The systems thinking, I think, is really interesting because a lot of the challenges are always on the intersection of sustainable development goals or domains, and how can we make it possible to support research that also deals with that wickedness of how issues are interconnected and how maybe sometimes you can get a change by doing something different than you would think you should do when you're looking at one domain or one SDG. So yes, that's a major kind of challenge for us at NVO, how can we support this kind of longer term commitment and ongoing programming. So not do it again, but build on what we've done and push on with the next phase of projects.
Thank you so much, Anita. Looking at the screen, thanks for joining the conversation. Somebody said the chance for PhDs to develop communication skills during workshops, helping them in conveying their local message. The flexibility to experiment, the synergy supported between research capacity development and societal relevance is an interesting point. And the partnerships between research and knowledge organizations in Delta countries, North and South. The focus on urban deltas, which is very relevant for the Netherlands and other Delta countries. The fact that also private sector got involved in the program, and co-creation between national government, industry, and research and knowledge organizations. Speaking of what should get more attention in the future programs, private sector, what are your thoughts, the involvement of private sector? Should that get more attention, Maarten?
I think this program started in 2012. That was the sort of heyday of the sort of transition from let's say a more traditional aid programming to the aid and trade concept, and how can they reinforce one another. I think there's a lot of areas of research where there's a lot of interaction with industry. I think also it is important to maintain sort of academic independence, so not everything in the service of business opportunities for the private sector. But I think that interaction between communities is healthy.
Anita, what are your thoughts? Because in some of the cartoons, there was talk of the relationship between researchers and policymakers. The media was mentioned as a stakeholder, but the private sector also plays a role. Sometimes more in the forefront, sometimes in a positive way. Many times also people are very critical. What's your take on if they should be given more attention? Not to say that there is a they, but the role of private sector in the future with regards to the UDW.
Yeah, I think the private sector is important as a stakeholder, and the people who came back from Glasgow, I wasn't there, but there was so many commitments from the private sector on, commitments on sustainable development, and also the private sector in the Netherlands is really pushing now for inclusive and sustainable society. So I think there's increasingly possibilities for collaboration, and that we should seek those in these programs, very much so. We are in NVO also trying to bridge better the work we do with government and the work we do with private sector. We have research programs in both domains. We think we need to create more synergies between them. Sometimes there's overlap, which is a shame.
Thank you. I have a few questions left. One for you both. In view what you said on the role and added value of research. What would be A, the message to the new minister, and B, input for the new NVO strategy?
Wow.
Is Anita going to answer the question about the minister?
It's,
Or
I'm just going to play dumb and say you can you can pick and choose.
No, I
Which
think
minister?
Well,
I
we
think-
still if
I
we
think-
ever get a government in the Netherlands, sorry people, but we don't have a government, but we're okay. There will eventually be a new minister, but you can choose which question you want to answer.
No, I think, I think, from the perspective of our portfolio, the UDW program and research programs in general are, they occupy a niche. So I think the message to the minister would be, first of all, protect that niche, make
Mhm.
sure that it continues to exist, that there is space for research. Our portfolio is always a balancing act between programs that deliver quick and tangible results, so people having access to sanitation, or people having access to more reliable irrigation services, or cities having
Yeah.
more reliable water supply. And a UDW program is, of course, much more the enabling environment and the capacity in countries, developing countries themselves, to
Yeah.
develop new knowledge. So, keep space for that. And second, let's develop a horizon. We have a 2030 horizon for the Sustainable Development Goals. We have an important 2050 horizon for climate. So let's consider those as a dot on the horizon and develop a sort of framework of how are we going to get there, and
Yeah.
what role does research play there.
Okay. And sorry to interrupt before Anita says something. I skipped one question which I did refer to in the second question, and that was the role of added value. What is the role and added value of the Delta research in the International Development Corporation? If you think that research is important, does the Netherlands have a role to play? That was actually the first question I wanted to ask Anita.
What the added value of this research?
And
The added value in what terms? Because I think for me, the added value is that there is this international collaboration, south and south-north. I think that's the way we should do research on areas where we need science to help kind of mitigate or solve big societal problems. I think it's strange that very often we do part of our research in the global south and the rest we do in the global north, and we don't learn from each other. We are faced with global challenges and we need kind of global consortia to be working on them.
yeah.
So for me, that's really a major added value of this work. Water, of course, is an area that's important to the Netherlands. We have a lot of expertise, but also a lot of problems. So it's fantastic that we collaborate together.
Yeah, so Holland, the Netherlands can play a role, and that research is important, but it shouldn't be just south-south or north-north. There should be an exchange. But then, what would you say to the minister? Because I didn't give you a chance to mention give your thoughts.
Yes, I hope that the minister is interested in actually continuing this kind of collaboration. As I said earlier, I think it's so important to keep on going once you've set something like this up. And also, you're just starting to do some solutions. And as donors or as government,
Sorry.
I think we also, do you still hear me?
Yeah, sorry for that.
I think as donors, NVO, or as a government, we should really, as part of these SDG aims, move on when there's some solution developed or when there's some kind of collaboration established. So I would really hope that that would be possible. Right now at NVO, actually our investment in international collaborative research is quite limited. And I would really like to talk about how we can make this better, build back better.
Thank you so much. Let's go to the audience reaction again. More attention to the future. Policy development and policy evaluation link. Capacity building of researchers and staff of knowledge organizations. Horizontal learning from south to north and north, south. As you said, long-term focus on urban deltas. more involvement of and contribution to other parts of Netherlands, Dutch government, water management authorities, national and decentralized, enabling sustainable partnerships beyond project/program timeline, perhaps stimulate, involve UDW consortia to tap into new funding schemes to allow for sustainable continuation to harvest the investments made in the past years. And the last is the local ownership and engagement from the beginning. That's a lot. Any reactions, feedback on what you just heard? Final thoughts?
Makes a lot of sense.
Makes
No, I recognize, I think, some of the things that I also mentioned, and so yeah.
Yeah, Anita?
Yeah, I agree. Makes a lot of sense, and I think in a way it summarizes the discussion we've been having.
Yeah.
But of course,
equal partnership, shaking the tree.
Yeah, and so this is a fantastic program where we can learn so much. Maybe for the future, we also want to learn from where things didn't go that well. So I think we want to be a learning organization in terms of how we collaborate in research. So,
are you saying that we should incorporate that as part of the process to really discuss what went wrong and what should be done better?
Yes, I think in these kinds of transdisciplinary programs, it's good to have that kind of reflexivity on how are we collaborating, how are things going. Sometimes you need some mediation, and we need to learn also from where things went better and where things were still a bit problematic.
So and we'll have an evaluation of the program.
Yeah.
I think next month there will be a report.
So after the flowers and the rejoicing, the festivities of the conference, we will sit and enjoy the uncomfortableness of this evaluation.
Yes. Discomfort is always a good basis for improvement.
I fully agree.
Thank you so much, Maarten Gischler and Anita Hardon. Thank you for being with us online at home. And hopefully you do not test positive, so success.
I will wait for that. Thank you.
It's time for... We'll be back in a second.